So I've got, maybe 15 or 20 slides. I'll try to move through them with some efficiency. So obviously the title, and that little quote at the bottom, the world may have been more dangerous, but it's never been more complicated. It's actually a derivation of a slide I use when I go out and do this for trade associations and other kind of groups. And I usually begin with, I call the slide my Army slide, what my Army buddies call the big hand, little map slide, where you get to kind of go like that and be very general. And I make 3 points, of which this is a derivation. But let me just give you all 3. Number 1, I've actually lived in a more dangerous world. Now I'm looking around and seeing folks a similar age, so most of you people have too. All right? Cuban Missile Crisis, Berlin, Checkpoint Charlie, barrel-to-barrel, armor, DEFCON 3, October 73. On Guam, we flushed 120 B-52s off the island because we had gone to DEFCON 3. So I've seen it more dangerous. I truly have never seen it more complicated. And what I tell our countrymen when I'm doing these other kinds of talks is I could fill whatever time you have given me for the rest of the morning just trying to tell you who's fighting in Syria. Okay? Just going down the starting lineup. And then I add, and I've never seen it more immediate. And here I don't just mean we get to see the video from the cell phone. Here I actually mean it happens here and things go bump in our lives over here. So more dangerous, never more complicated, never more immediate. So here's the outline. And boy, if there was ever a Claude Rains moment to round up the usual suspects, this is it. Okay? I did want to add a couple of other things. Just remember I told you I'll be doing commentary here as we go through because the young folks have done all the heavy lifting. There are a couple things that aren't here, all right? Afghanistan specifically, although we slided in a bit with the terrorism presentation. I must add something that we really didn't emphasize when I was director. That's a long time ago now, but it was the Bush administration, and I would now genuinely add climate change and the effect of climate change on strategic equations and strategic equilibrium throughout the world. Most importantly, I would actually add the United States of America to this list. Now, I hesitate because it's called the threat report, all right? And I'm not describing America as a threat. But if we were not doing this at Sea Island, but if we were on the Mediterranean coast in France or Spain, and it wasn't an American-based group, but a European-based group, and we're talking about the global situation, what do we have to keep our eye on? The United States would be on this list. And frankly, it'd be at the top of this list for our European friends. I may have mentioned this last year, and if I have, I apologize, I'll be efficient. But even if I did, it bears repeating in terms of what I'm trying to describe here, in terms of what's causing the global system to shift. And again, I'm not talking about America as threat or American core level forces about to cross a border and change lines on the map. But we are changing direction. And we are arguing about changing direction. And I'm not going to argue about whether that's good or that's good. I'm just telling you we're changing direction. So I was in Baltimore 2 years ago for the Republican Congressional Get-Together. They do it every year. Last year they did it in Philadelphia. This year they did it at Greenbrier. Remember the train hit the truck in the West Virginia hills? You may have seen that news story. Those are the Republican members of Congress, House and Senate, going to the offsite. And what they do for two and a half days is try to build up strong Republican consensus on the key issues of the day. Okay, I'll let that sink in just for a minute. Okay. And I was on the security panel. I was there with Ryan Crocker, Mike Chertoff, Ray Odierno, and Bob Kagan. And first of all, if you watch CNN after 7 o'clock at night, 5 people on a panel is already far too many people. Right? And so we're getting the questions from the moderator, we're kind of getting up to speed, and all of a sudden the members start tossing questions at the moderator, and then the members start tossing questions at us, not going through the moderator. Then the members start tossing questions at one another, all right? And it's not quite chaotic, but let's say very interactive. Okay? At which point Kagan, Brookings, okay, historian, Bob kind of levitates, we're kind of like in chairs like this. Bob just kind of levitates out of his chair and puts his arms out like he's Moses or something coming down from Sinai and says, look, what's going on is the melting down of the post-World War II American liberal, Bretton Woods, World Bank, IMF, world order. Get it? And I just thought, damn, that's really good, Bob. And I think he's right. And it's dying a natural death. Right now, we can argue about other people accelerating it, all right? But even without accelerants, it's dying a natural death because the world on which it was based is changing. I mean, that was at the height of the linear industrial, less well interconnected world. And we built up a bunch of wonderful institutions that really worked, and now the relevancy of those institutions is being challenged. The grand debate, okay, is since that Bretton Woods American liberal thing was made in America, based on American wisdom, American values, and sustained by American power. And oh, by the way, I said this up at Princeton yesterday. You know, you invite me back in 300 years, and we give that 75 years a grade. We're getting more than a gentleman's C. Right? That is the most peaceful, most healthful, most long-lived, best educated 3/4 of a century so far in the history of the human species. So we'll get good grades for it, but now it's going. And the global question is, since we played such a prominent role, is where are we on 2.0? Okay? Are we in the same way? Probably not. But how much in are we? And that, frankly, is the grand debate that is the backdrop to all these things that we're seeing up here. One other note on this kind of shifting, where are you Americans? All right? The document that outlines our approach to 1.0 was NSC 68, Paul Nitze back in the day. I actually dusted it off not many months ago and read it. It's really good. I mean, when you look at it, it is elegant in its prose. And it is incredibly values-based before it gets on to the point where it says, and we got to go build a hydrogen bomb, right? which actually it does say, all right? But it is incredibly values-based, and the values on which it is based includes a community of nations. And throughout the text, it genuflects routinely to the word diversity. Okay? Now, again, being descriptive and not prescriptive or judgmental, H.R. McMaster and Gary Cohn wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal in May, or at least had their names attached to the op-ed, in which is contained the stunning sentence, "The world is not a community of nations." And when Nadia Shadlow had to write the national security strategy of the United States in December, she had the great challenge of trying to square this history with a new, different approach from the president and from many of those around the president. Recall the infamous quote that may or may not have been said by the former Secretary of State describing the mental acuity of the current president, that one, preceded by the Anglo-Saxon adjective, right. The best press accounts of where that happened, and there are a variety, is in a meeting, I believe it was at the tank, in the tank, where you had Secretary of Defense, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and the Secretary of State actually walking through the history I just quickly outlined. And you had Mattis, according to press accounts, that's all I got to go on, no inside baseball here. You had Mattis simply saying that the greatest gift from the greatest generation was the rules-based international order they had bequeathed us. And the fact that that was an argued point simply suggests to you why the rest of the world, if they were giving this briefing, would have the Americans at the top of the list in terms of where are you going.